Are you an entrepreneur or ready to become a boss? Welcome to Hawaii Boss, the business podcast made in Hawaii, where you will hear from island movers and shakers on who they are and their impact on our state. And now, step into the office of your host for Hawaii Boss, David Pettijohn.
Aloha, Hawaii Boss podcast crew listening in out there, or listening in or watching in, or whatever you do to get your information about, particularly business information and Hawaii leadership information. We go into the boss's office every week, or as many times as we can if we find the right folks. And today we're very fortunate. Today we've got Ted Peck, president at Holu Hou Energy, which is a solar energy and energy consulting company. And he may correct me if I'm wrong, but Ted, welcome.
Aloha. Thanks for inviting me to participate. I'm excited for where we could go in this conversation.
Sure. Well, listen, everybody's starting to get the concept of energy right now because gas prices are really burning a hole in their pocket. And so when we say energy, is a lot of people don't know even where we get it, especially on the island. It's oil, it's petroleum based, but you'd have a better, because your experience and background, sort of uniquely positions you to help us enlighten this. Currently as this energy company, but also working in the state government for the energy portion, working on those issues in the administration. So kind of give us a little bit of feedback and help us understand where do we get our energy?
Well, when I was at the state, it was pretty well a third. Where the way we consumed energy was a third. A third was consumed on the grid. A third was transportation, ground transportation, and a third was aviation fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Aviation fuel, then as now, is pretty much entirely fossil fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I want to say JP4, but I may be off on that.
Coming away from that, if we look at it as a category, moving away from that is very difficult.
That's going to be
current technology.
Yeah, from an Old Testament standpoint, I would call that the high place.
Okay.
It's the last thing that we can remove.
Okay. Especially if we want continued air travel from Hawaii, right?
Correct. It's just now we've aircraft have gotten significant. They continue to get significantly more efficient, right? Which reduces the amount that you're consuming per passenger mile, but it still is going to be, unfortunately, fossil fuel for the time being. When I was and there's some initiatives to change that, so I'm not going to say never, and I'm not fully up to speed on those. But one of my greatest disappointments from the ARA funding, the recovery funding of 2009.
What is that now? People may not understand what that is.
The American Recovery. I forgot what ARRA.
Recovery Act. Okay.
That's right. It was a Recovery Act.
Right.
Yeah.
Where they were wanting everybody to buy a
$800 billion, right?
They wanted everybody to buy a Chevy Volt or something like that.
There was a number of components of that bill. Obviously, and you can't. It's pretty hard to spend $800 billion in one place, right?
Yeah.
But one of the components that was really exciting that didn't achieve what we set out to do was getting biofuel, especially biofuel from algae.
Mm-hmm.
All of the models, we were dealing with and talking about $140 a barrel. Right now, I didn't look recently. I think we're at somewhere between 110 and 120.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the models for biofuel from algae were predicated on $100 a barrel oil for the long term. Mm-hmm. And between then and now, we've gone down to less than 30 at times. And so
using this technology, which is how old? 30 years, 40?
No. I'm saying the market has gone down to less than $30 a barrel.
Okay.
This the technology that the stimulus invested in was trying to get. There's a number of initiatives, a number of companies, a number of awards, all trying to get commercial jet fuel or what they call drop-in fuel, meaning that it's chemically the same as diesel or jet fuel or gasoline. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to make any changes to the engines you could just drop in this biofuel because it's chemically the same.
Okay.
We didn't get to the point where those were commercialized. I know we deep dove here pretty quickly into one area. We talked about the whole picture.
Sure.
So let's go back to the whole picture.
Okay, gotcha.
So aviation fuel is a third, ground transportation is a third, and then the grid is about a third. And the grid is where a lot of the attention has gone to, because the grid is the most centrally controlled, which means that policies that can change it are the easiest to implement. And that's where we have a renewable portfolio standard. We have a regulated utility and a less regulated, but also regulated co-op on Kauai that have to be responsive to state law and to the Public Utilities Commission. And so it's easier to drive change in those spaces. Ground transportation is dependent upon market forces.
Sure.
Aviation fuel is really dependent upon technology, principally. The principal barrier is technology.
Sure.
Market forces now, it is technology. I mean, I have one of the first 500 Leafs that ever was manufactured, and I got it in 2011 after I left the state.
Sure.
And we really worked, and my successors and subsequent governments have worked to make Hawaii as electric vehicle friendly as possible. There's still a lot of work to happen. The utility has funded a position, a director of somebody who's on the electrification of transportation, but you're still largely dependent on market forces. And so what those folks are doing is easing people's discomfort with buying an electric vehicle and not knowing where they're going to be able to get power for it. Right?
That seems to be the major concern. Of course, there are more and more, you're talking to the Leaf, which is still a popular vehicle, but it's like everybody has a Tesla here in Hawaii. It's like a sort of a requirement for entry or something like that. But
some places have a higher concentration, but we also have a Model 3, Tesla Model 3. I have friends that own Bolts. Bolts have had some hiccups. There are other electric vehicles that are coming out. My cousin, who lives in Washington State, just bought a Rivian truck, which sounds like it's an unbelievable vehicle.
Well, I saw someone plug in a Jeep the other day right downtown at the zoo.
Well, and a lot of people, there's a lot of vehicles that are plug-in hybrids.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So
it's that access parking, maybe.
Yeah, it's got a gasoline engine, but it does have a battery. Which means that it's going to be more efficient. And then if you have a plug, then you can drive for some amount of time, depending on that size of that battery, just on the battery.
So putting this all in perspective, I mean, we've got to fuel these vehicles. The ground transportation takes a lot of fuel. Even though we have electric cars, it's still dependent upon the fuel source that generates the electricity. So
I hear a lot of people. I mean, it's interesting. I'm pretty convinced that there is a well-funded campaign against electric vehicles, that those who have the most to lose from massive adoption of EVs are funding a campaign to denigrate them. And that's one of the things you often hear is that, I'm replacing gasoline with coal, so why would I do that? But the reality is that if you have a gasoline vehicle, the only thing you could put into it is gasoline. If you have an electric vehicle, you can put low sulfur fuel oil on this island into it. You could put coal into it. You can put solar from your roof into it. You could put wind power from the North Shore into it or from offshore.
Right.
And so there's the fungibility you get with electric vehicles that you don't get with internal combustion engine vehicles.
Yeah, internal combustion engines, there's one track, there's basically one infrastructure called, the gasoline pipeline, basically.
Right. There was a number of vehicles that had flex fuel. They were flex fuel, which meant that they were basically, today gasoline engines are really optimized for gasoline as a fuel for a particular octane and so forth. The flex fuel vehicles have a ruggedness into them, so you could put kerosene in them, which is in essence is gasoline, or you could put ethanol, 100% ethanol, or there's a number of other things you could put into them. You can't put diesel because it's just that doesn't work.
Right.
But the point is that they attempted to make it flex fuel, and it's very rare that you see a flex fuel vehicle on the road today because it has a lower efficiency, and there's really no flexible sources of fuels that you could do. So, yeah.
Well, you see, also, we'll talk some more about solar because that's, looks like that's what you're helping to support. That one avenue of gaining energy is that solar infrastructure that can be used on the grid rather than this coal generated or gas generated, energy. But you're also seeing other forms to generate for, with these buses with hydrogen. Is that what we're talking about? Whether another fuel source there again that would be, it's similar. If you have these kind of cars, you don't have really a source to fill up this way. But what does that help us understand that, if you know?
So there's a lot of people that are really excited about hydrogen. I'm less so, and there's a couple reasons why. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise as things change, but a couple of points about hydrogen. Hydrogen is not an energy source. It is an energy storage medium. Okay, there's no untapped reserves of hydrogen hidden in the earth somewhere. There are actually, it's called hydrocarbons, aka fossil fuel. And so a lot of the hydrogen today is generated from fossil fuel, either from electrolysis. I was a submariner and we had an oxygen generator, and the byproduct we treated as a waste product. We made hydrogen and we pumped it overboard because we didn't have a use for it.
Right.
So hydrogen is not a fuel source. It is a energy storage medium.
Yeah, sort of a residual of fuel production.
And people talk about blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen from renewable resources. I did a project actually on the Big Island, and the customer was really interested in doing hydrogen. It was a restaurant with other loads there in that facility. And I started looking at, buying an electrolysis machine and powering it with solar power.
Sure.
And the costs were, it's really the equivalent. And now today we'd say, yeah, that's what we're paying now. But at the time, apart from even the hardware, the cost of the energy was $5 a gallon of gas equivalent
to create the new source.
To create the source. And that's assuming that you don't take the 1/8 the electrolyzer cost and amortize that over the life of the solar, 20 or 25 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, as we talk about energy, not everybody kind of just is attracted to this sort of field. It looks like in your undergraduate as a nuclear officer at Annapolis, and you're learning studied physics. It sounds like what drew you to that? In your younger years, what fascinated you about physics?
So I took high school chemistry and physics, and I was good at it. So, and I found it fascinating. I've always been someone who's looking to understand, and God gave me the ability to understand it. So.
Right.
When I went to the Naval Academy, initially I was going to be an aerospace engineer and be a pilot. My dad was a pilot. My brother became a pilot. So I thought that was just the family business.
Right. That was dinner table conversation anyway. So, hey, might as well put it in, right?
My brother and I, we have a story. My dad built, in his lifetime, he's built about a dozen home-built airplanes. He flew 20 years for the Air Force, flew in Vietnam, flew the C-5, which is a huge aircraft. Right. And then he flew for UPS for 20 years. And ever since, I think he started in about 73, he's been building home-built airplanes. And he just actually got old enough that he's like, okay, I'm done.
And hang up the pilot.
Yeah. So he has a master's in aviation technology. And so I grew up, it wasn't kitchen table conversation. It was carport conversation.
Right.
In fact, my brother and I have this story. I'm holding on to the front of the fuselage. My brother's on the back end of the fuselage, and my dad is trying to jam something in with a broom handle.
Sure.
And broom handle snapped, and I think my brother and I both saw our lives flash before our eyes.
Not from the broom handle, but the fury that would be emanating from your father.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Right.
Yes. So when I got to Navy, I validated chemistry because I had a great high school, and but my physics wasn't calculus based. I had taken the wrong AP exam, so I had to take physics, even though I had a really good physics. And so I kind of slept through physics. And my second semester, the professor, who was a Navy commander, said, "Yeah, Midshipman Peck, you should think about majoring in physics." And I was I thought it was a suggestion. And a couple of weeks later, it became more than a suggestion. So when I went and saw
that's the opportunity of the military officer in a military school. There's a mentorship begins right away.
Yes. There's a term voluntold.
Yeah,
sometimes
right.
you're voluntold that you'll do something.
Right.
But I went to the professor and I said, well, he'd have to answer the question all in these, I had like a half dozen questions, and he answered them all in ways that I needed to. So I majored in physics. So
yeah, it kind of aligned with your way of thinking and your approach to science and the world.
Yeah, and fewer labs. That was one of my requirements. Fewer labs.
You started getting the nuance of, hey, where this actually is applied, because then it becomes a real, in the military with physics, it becomes real applied immediately. So tell us about that in the deep hollows of the submarine.
Yeah, so being a submariner is a life experience, and that shaped me and colored my perspective and experience in deep and profound ways. I still, I retired from the reserves. I didn't command a submarine. I left active duty after my first two submarines. But I have a great deal of affinity and identity. In fact, I will just do a shout out. If you haven't been to the U.S. Pacific Fleet Submarine Museum, AKA the Bowfin, it just got renovated, and it is a spectacular museum. It is
You're right down in Pearl Harbor?
Right here down the hill from where I live, actually. It is really very well done. I served with the executive director, Chuck Merkel. He and the board did a great job. The Cold War display is everything you would want it to be in an unclassified level. It's really, really good. So I can't, it's, if you haven't been in the last 2 years, go. You need to go.
Yeah, because I think people get removed from some of our history and our ability, and I think all of them are on display here in Hawaii. All the different services and branches and of opportunity to see that rich history, but also the current history and current goings on of the military.
Yes, I'm on the board for the Pacific Historical Parks Association, which is kind of an adjunct to the National Park Service. PHP runs a lot of the bookstores at historic sites all across the Pacific, not just at the Arizona, the Museum of Valor, but also at a number of other museums across the Pacific, including Holu Hou, the site where we're commemorating the people who were interned. So it's a very important endeavor, and we do have a tremendous amount of history that's available to us right here. The number of stories are just tremendous in terms of what happened on a global basis. Of course, Hawaii is rich in stories about the Hawaiian people and the evolution of the Hawaiian people and who they are and their identity, and where we as a state and as a community have been in a very particular and very special way. And the military, there's historically obviously some conflict there, but there also is some real synergies and great things that happen there, and great heroism and support that happened there, and great acts of leadership.
Right. And I think that's important, as you know, of course, history sounds like you're a history buff a bit, and love preserving those things, because I think there's valuable lessons that we learn from understanding our own history, regardless of what it exactly looked like, you know, good or bad. We sort of, that was us then, and okay, what can we learn from it now and go forward? So, you know, key to understand who we are and who we want to be going forward is understanding our own history. So appreciate that work. Certainly, I wasn't aware that you know, that commitment that you had out to the world out there.
Yeah.
But to tell us, you know, everyone has this personal component, but then the work that they do, the thing that gets them up in the morning and, you know, helps them pay the bills. If you know, that's the especially with the way the stock market and everything's going on. So you're engaged in this profession that you've, from your administration to consulting through now to this company. Tell us a little bit about that and the sort of the impetus for that and the story, I guess, as it were. So
the story. Okay, yeah, I'll try to make this brief. First of all, I can't hold a job, so there's a couple different, you know, waypoints I've got to explain what happened.
Sure.
I ran the state energy office for about 3 years. A gentleman came to me in late 2010 and kind of spoke to some concerns I had that the road we were going down to in achieving our renewable future was really going to exclude people being able to put in, you know, solar on their homes and energy independence, not just as a community, but also as a family,
Mm-hmm.
that would be part of it. And so he basically approached me about, you know, helping reinvent HEI,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and take HEI private, drive in a course of a 7-year time frame to being largely 70% renewable, and then take the company and make it a public company again.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed that was very compelling to me. And in the end of the day, I've studied organizational change. It was one of those things. I did that because I did not want to, in my later years, look back and say, I really could have done something different. But I made a decision out of fear, you know, fear for my own career,
Right.
You know, fear for what it could cost me. You know,
That's what, yeah, I think that everyone worries about a little bit, like the what if I don't do it, you know, how would I respect myself later if I, you know, if I don't, I see something that should and needs to be done and I can do it. And
right.
For whatever reason,
I was unwilling to bear up with that regret.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lesson I've learned from that, even though after 2 years, obviously, you know, we didn't end up buying HECO, and I ended up not being paid for the last 18 months of my time in that. So it did cost me, but I have no regrets.
The experience must have been, you know,
it was very unique and mind expanding experience. And I would tell you, you know, if I were speaking to youth or whoever your audience is,
sure.
We often in our culture have an expectation of not having to bear risk.
Mm-hmm.
And we are afraid of risk. Mm-hmm. And I am one who full-throatedly says, don't be afraid of risk, take risk, don't be afraid of failure. When you fail, when you fail,
right,
get back up and move out again.
Yeah, because you still have the same resources when you started that before you had the, you know, so you can go back to, hey, start back to the drawing board, as they say.
Right. And you'll be a much better person. You'll be humbler. You'll have a much broader experience. You'll be much more, you know, and process matters. So engage in that process in a way that's wise so that, you know, you don't totally, you know, sometimes I'll say bridges can get toasted. Don't totally burn them.
Right.
But recognize, make deliberate decisions. And don't make decisions out of fear. Don't make decisions out of fear.
Yeah, because usually, you're going to limit your your potential opportunities, because you won't see the pathways that maybe you're there. If you're in a position of fear, you're looking like you're just protecting. But if you let that out, you can say, okay, there are options there. I can think now, because when you're in that sort of that fight or flight, you can't really make really good decisions. And I suppose they taught you that in the military and your experience and having to in tough decisions and in tough places. But your work now, though, as you've started this company, what would you call it? Say the mission is.
So so fast forwarding, I got into, in that time, I started getting to doing power purchase agreements with churches because I kind of knew enough to be dangerous, and I did it for my own church. I did it for another church.
When you say power purchase, what does that mean?
So a power purchase agreement is where, for somebody who doesn't want to own the solar on their roof, or they don't have the ability to take the tax advantages, they basically sign an agreement where, hey, I'll buy all the kilowatt hours you can provide me to at a lower rate than what I'm paying on the utility market.
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy those from you on a fixed amount for a fixed number of years. You own it. You operate it, you maintain it, and you get the benefit of the revenue that comes to that, and the tax credits that are associated with owning that system. That's a power purchase agreement.
Okay.
So I did that for my church in Liliha. I did that for another church in Liliha. I did that. Now moving forward, we've done about 75 of those.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those are quite small. Some of those have been quite sizable. I did that pretty exclusively until in 2015, I joined a company. We formed a new company called Holu Hou Energy, and Holu means resilience. And in leadership, you talked about resilience. Holu is really a Hawaiian word that describes the behavior of the taro leaf in the wind and the rain of storms, and how it's spongy and snaps back and is resilient. And so I thought that was really a perfect name for what we're doing. We're helping people be economically and physically resilient here in a tropical environment, where we're dependent upon energy that's generated on this island, and we can't import energy from the next state over. Right. So, and it's become even more important as a community, and even as the commission talks about resilience. It's a bit of a catchword, especially after Hurricane Sandy in New York. Right.
Sure.
So that company, we were kind of cruising along, doing projects, and the board chair of NSYNC, the parent company, decided to take things in a different direction. And so the company ended up in receivership. My partner and I both led. He was leading NSYNC. I was leading Holu. Mm-hmm. We both left those companies. Those companies don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And we formed Holu Hou, which means new resilience. Mm-hmm. And with a focus not just on doing commercial scale projects, but also building a product that builds resilience into homes. And so what is technically called a single phase product versus a commercial 3-phase product. And so we have a product now that I have it in my house, and we put it onto a couple of hundred homes here in Hawaii. That with a battery component, it's an inverter and a battery with PV together that are what we call DC coupled. So the energy coming out of the inverter either comes from the PV directly, or it comes from the battery, or it can come from your neighbor system that is connected on the DC side to load at your unit in a multifamily setting. And so with this technology, last year, or actually just this year, we did the final completion for a project at Koa, which is a low-income housing project on Kauai. So we put inverters and batteries on each unit on a 134 unit low-income housing project, and we did it economically at a savings to the
Sure, it sounds like a mini grid.
It is a mini DC grid. That is correct.
Yeah, that's a powerful concept. So that's independent little space on its own. Are they connected to the central grid, and there's a requirement to give back? It feels like that there's something that's always a hitch there.
It's a challenge because distributed generation, which has become a big deal in Hawaii and nationally as well, is an arrangement that wasn't factored into business models when utilities started, right? So utilities are having to reinvent their business models to account for the fact that people, homes in a certain area are going to be self-consuming. They're going to be making their own energy. They don't have to buy from the grid. But to your question directly, yeah, every inverter at COA is connected to the KIUC grid and has an interconnection agreement associated with it.
So ultimately, if necessary, the central, I guess, deciders, as it were, the administration, to make sure that we power the entire island, has that emergency ability to pull energy or just to understand to understand the pull on the grid.
Yeah, the system's designed. Our system is designed to service roughly about 2/3 of the energy for that community. And then a third comes from the utility. Our system in the interconnection agreement, we don't get any compensation and we can't export to the grid. So it just services energy demands for the units at that community. But yeah, if our system went down entirely, they're still on the grid. So they really do have a higher level of resilience as well.
Sure.
Because if we go down, they have the grid. If the grid goes down, they have our system. So
then the central system becomes more of a backup rather than the primary sort of provider of sorts.
In another design system, I would say that, and we do have some where it's really a backup, but in this, it's really a shared resource, meaning the tenants get energy from both the grid and from the system on their roof.
And helps it to bring down the prices, which everyone's very excited.
That's right. We've helped them not just to bring down, but to stabilize their energy costs, which means that the tenants can budget, the property manager can budget, and they can budget out on a longer term.
So if someone wants to find out more about this, they want to go, exploring. There's so many, you look up solar energy, and there's just this confusing mess of sort of, and they don't, which ones are from Hawaii and which ones are, it's good you have a Hawaiian name here. That helps a bit. So what's the first step?
They could go to holuhou.com, HOLUHOU.com. And we really have 4 primary business channels. One is we still do commercial systems. We install, but we also partner with other companies, and we finance power purchase agreements for commercial systems. I've been doing that really the longest, right? I've been doing that for over 10 years.
Sure.
We also do single family homes, right? I said I have it on I've had our system on my house for the last year and a half, and we sell to homeowners to install it on their house. They can own it, or they can do a lease, or they can finance it in different ways. So that's a second venue.
And there's different advantages to either one. You lease, then you don't have to, if there's something goes wrong with it, you don't have to, you guys have to fix it and that kind of thing. So there's some advantages that way. Yeah.
Third party ownership is one is, again, if you can't monetize the credits efficiently, but also if hey, I don't want to mess with it. It's not my core business.
Right.
A good practice is exporting, outsourcing your core businesses. So whether it's a homeowner or whether it's a commercial property, they can just say, hey, you take care of that and provide us power. We're not going to take the risk. You take the risk, you get the reward.
Sure. Yeah.
A third business that we have is that multifamily business, which is a largely unaddressed business space in Hawaii for a number of reasons. And not just in Hawaii, on the mainland as well. because it's a very complex space. It's hard when you have, tenants or renters. How do you, what kind of arrangement do you make to pay for that?
Right.
How do you, who funds it? It's just a complex space, and we have chosen to take the hard places and make it one of our core business areas.
Well, again, because complexity, that's what you get paid to do. Businesses thrive in these spaces where, complexity drives a need. And so you engage in that to streamline it, and it becomes proprietary information, like this is how we do it. No one else knows how to deal with this complex issue.
Yeah, there's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, and you almost don't need to read the book to understand what that is. It's basically go where there isn't blood in the water, do the things that no one else does, and do them well, and you can succeed that way. So that's our focus area, and it is hard. There's no question that is a very difficult space. And our fourth path is that we have a product we put together, we've engineered it, we have a manufacturers who make it for us, and we're working to now sell that to other installers so they can install our stuff. We're starting to do that in Hawaii. We've had discussion with a number of other solar companies, and we are expanding into the mainland as well, discussing with solar installers installing our equipment. So those are our four business areas.
Awesome. Well, listen, the Hawaii, though, challenge is finding the skilled labor to be able to install this stuff, and also to do some of the other technical things. How are you addressing some of these challenges, and what, some ideas around that? Everybody's scratching their brain about it, but
yeah, that brings, when you first, a couple of months ago, you guys reached out to me to do this, I thought, I've been a leader before, and right now this leadership's kind of not a big deal. But ever since actually you guys reached out, I have been in the throes and the thick of heavy duty leadership. Right. In fact, the reason I have John Paul Jones up behind me is because over the last, actually a year ago in April, and then over this last 6 months especially, I have been working to lead through, as all of us, anybody who manages or leads any kind of endeavor, these are arduous times. They're arduous, at the base level because of COVID. And I think, even though we've gone from pandemic to endemic, it's just among us, and we're figuring out how to live with it. But it has had manifold impacts, both in the regulatory environment and in government, both the government's ability to do its job and the decisions that government makes and how that impacts on businesses.
Sure. The entire infrastructure, the health part was one thing, but the shutdown piece was an entire infrastructure wobble that no one has ever seen before. It was like an event of unheard of proportions. No one's experienced that like that.
That's right. And the impacts of that are manifold and ongoing. And you would not, challenges you have, some people know the great resignation, right?
Sure.
People just saying, hey, I'm out of here for this job. There are a lot of reasons why people leave jobs, but we have made a number of decisions on a governmental level where people are more able to do that. And, you can make a case that it's not all a bad thing, but if you're running a business, it's a very difficult thing because your ability to hang on to people is much more difficult. We have had people install staff who we pay, we're not paying these people minimum wage. We're paying them double minimum wage or more.
Right.
And they just decide, I'm going to go surfing for a couple months,
Right.
And so your ability to deliver on time.
That sounds awesome.
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
But they have the flexibility to do that because, if you're single or you're young or whatever like that, hey, why work? Everyone's kind of trying to figure out, well, this whole thing has changed and now they're making different decisions about how they want to be employed. If this 9 to 5 thing is really theirs, or are they going to want to go work for themselves or work for the man or what? So a lot of interference and you trying to make that connection with people.
Right. It's not all, like you said, it's not all bad that's happened. I think that basically many, and on one level, many Americans feel a little more empowered, or have the opportunity to feel more empowered about who they are and what their career path looks like. Many, though, have felt less empowered. And again, they're fearful. Fear is very disempowering. And there's a lot of reasons to be afraid. People find a lot of reasons to be afraid.
Yeah, these are the times that will try men's souls, I think, as it.
Yeah, that was Mr. Payne, not John Paul Jones. But
right.
John Paul Jones, just back to this quote, one of the reasons I really like it, the story here is that, he was a captain in the Navy, in the early colonial Navy during the Revolution, the American Revolution. And he went to Europe and ended up getting a ship that he renamed the John Paul Jones. I'm sorry, renamed the Bonhomme Richard. And he took the Bonhomme Richard and he went around the United Kingdom and was trying to basically do some pirateering to intercede, on some shipping, and basically take the war to the British shore
in their backyard.
Right. And so he ended up in a battle with a ship that was physically a little smaller, but the Bonhomme Richard at this point was a pretty old ship. It had a wooden bottom, not a copper bottom. It was last year's model. Okay. And the Serapis was brand new, old tech, totally. It was a merchant, actually. It was a Indian merchant, would go, but between never intended as a warfighter, right? He converted it, and Serapis was what he took on. Had a copper bottom, was faster, and had more guns. And he came up. Serapis was defending this shipment of goods, and he got into a battle with Serapis. And at the first shot, Serapis knocked down his colors, his number of his sails, and basically did enough damage that the Bonhomme Richard ended up sinking. But it looked like to the captain of the Serapis that they were striking their colors. They were taking down their flag and surrendering. And so the captain of the Serapis called out and says, "Are you striking?" And that's what John Paul Jones said. He said, "I have not yet begun to fight." And so he was actually, and it almost brings tears to my mind because this is a very powerful story for me. Yeah. He basically said, "I am not giving up." And he ended up winning the battle. And during the night, Bonhomme Richard sank. He moved his whole crew under the Serapis, took it as a captured ship from the British. And that battle actually significantly impacted on the French deciding to support the colonies in the American Revolution.
Because they had some grit,
That's right. We had grit, and we were an outfit worth supporting.
Yeah, it was like the first Navy SEALs going up, sneaking up on them after they thought they sunk, and went in there and grabbed the ship. Yeah, because it was normal. There was this chivalry and stuff, and that's the whole thing. That there's lots of fun about that. There was a certain rule to it. Have you struck? Is that what He said basically
exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of like
very differently then. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's so no, I'm still going. You better keep going because I'm coming after you. Right. That's the whole.
Yep. Yep. And so him calling out, "I have not yet begun to fight." It wasn't just that guy that heard it. It was his whole crew who heard it. So him exhibiting grit and courage and determination and a belief that they could accomplish what they had set out to accomplish in the face of an enemy who was in essence taunting him, just, I'm sure, electrified his whole crew.
Right.
And helped them win.
Right. And just overwhelmed them with that sort of that spirit, basically that positive spirit. And that we call it momentum. It's changing the momentum. Like you said, you've had to create this leadership momentum during these headwinds over the past 6 months, 18 months, whatever it is. So you've had to sort of, that's what leadership is, sort of creating that momentum in the direction that you.
Yes. And we do a lot as everybody does remotely, right? We have a small development team. We have a couple crews that are out there actually building the stuff. I try not to waste people's time. So, people are generally self-actualized, and management is really helping people understand what they need to do and give them the resources to do it. Right. That's a hard job often, but leadership is not just managing them. It's inspiring them and giving them the courage and the motivation to not just do what they're supposed to do, but to do it well, to do it with excellence, to do it ahead of schedule, within cost, and to feel like, hey, I'm not just laying bricks, I'm building a cathedral. To understanding the broader vision of what we're doing. And to understand the role that they serve is really critical to giving people value and helping them feel like I'm important as a person. I'm also important to this venture.
Yeah, that you have a place. You have a place in the right, and that's what really generates that energy. Is they feel comfortable. They don't feel unsafe about being in their place where they're at now. And then it requires a lot of support. And some people have that fear that, and being in a group or a company like yours, again, it sounds like that tries to manage in that direction, really provides that forward energy and not disallows negativity, because there's going to be that. There's going to be these headwinds. There's going to be bad days and things, but allows us to sort of be yourself. But like you said, self-actualizing, and we try to create that for folks to be able to, let's help you be your best you.
Right. Exactly. And when things, when untoward events, bad things happen, the job of the leader is to not lose their head and to help people get aligned and to move forward, past the damage, past the difficulty, past the disaster, and to recover and to recognize that, hey, this disaster, not only does it not define us, but it's not the end of the world. And it is something that we can recover from. And that is not a trivial task. People often, especially if it's an experience that they haven't experienced, I'm grateful for the times that I've experienced failure. I often draw back on my submarine experience. We had a number of times where we had fires on board, and I tell people that, hey, I've been on fire at 400 feet in a place that if we had surfaced, it would have made the news. It's pretty hard to get excited about, this, we had this setback in an inverter, or, this.
When you're experiencing, it's like, like, oh, what did I do? It's failure. It's my fault. But no, you're learning through that experience that some of those things you have no control of.
That's right. And that just happens. And sometimes that's not in a young person's experience, and so when that does happen, hey, this is how we get past that. It's okay. And if you, and an inverter failing, but if a person fails, when I was, I spent 12 years at Booz Allen, and one of the guys who, worked for me there, Bob Litsky, we were talking, it wasn't just him. We were talking about helping, people through failure. And he quoted to me that, so-and-so, some guy was in a job and made like a $4 million mistake. And the guy came into his boss's office and said, so I guess you're going to fire me. Yeah. And he said, fire you? I just invested $4 million into your development.
Yeah.
So helping people believe that they can overcome their failure.
Right. And that's, in this competitive world, not always the mentors that we have and bosses around always on their first thing on their list. It's kind of like a good leader hopefully has that view. And I'm glad that you've been able to share this rich sort of history of your leadership today, Ted, and also the work that you're doing to create an energy efficient, future for Hawaii. I'd love to talk more as things continue to grow. And before we let you go, we ask some, we call it a pauhana little moment. We kind of ask some questions for you and see if so the hot seat a little bit and to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, but, let them roll.
All right. So what do you tell your friends when they call over and complain that they're having a snowstorm in the mainland?
Well, they don't typically call and complain, but I do look out the window and then check my phone to see what the temperature is, and I just let them know that, that's it. I've been in snowstorms. I lived in Connecticut and Maryland, and my older daughter lives in Washington State now. And
rain. We used Puyallup, Washington State, rain. Yeah, so it's I find it kind of difficult. I feel kind of bad saying, oh, how's the weather over here? Well, it's kind of, I try and make it, it's 82, something like that, or down in the 60s last night, kind of cold, and I just kind of
exactly. Well, I remind people that our windows are louvered, so if it's 60 degrees outside, it's 60 degree inside, and I can guarantee their thermostats are not set for 60 degrees.
That's right. Yeah, so it is a change, and you've got a blanket in the middle of the night because it's 60 degrees, because your house is probably a nice even 71 degrees or whatever in the mainland, and
right.
So it's different, but enjoyable. I would take this, I guess, over Minneapolis or something like that in the middle of winter.
I would too.
Awesome.
Well, we did.
Well, what keeps you, Hawaii? Your attachment to Hawaii, where does that come from?
Well, frankly, the Navy moved me here against my will, and I tried to leave and failed at doing that. So I'm here because this is where God has me. When people say, don't you love Hawaii? I do. I think Hawaii is a very special, peculiar in a very good way place. And we have a lot to give to the world. But I'm here until God says I'm not, whether I move somewhere else or he, takes me away. So but it is, I thought I asked for a submarine out of San Diego, and it was there for a year before it came here to decommission in Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. So it was very much not my will to be here.
Well, yeah, and that's usually required. And that's what, as I've been talking with folks on Hawaii Boss people, as they, stay here in the island, sort of they're provided, you can do a job that can keep you here. There's this requirement, I think, to sort of give back, and to be a part of the community and to be involved in that way. And certainly you're showing that sort of resilience. Of course, your name Holu means resilient, and so we're excited about that. But also, next one, what is island fever, and have you ever experienced it?
I have a lot of people that do talk about island fever. You got to remember, I used to basically sleep in a coffin, right, for months at a time. So
there's like 6 guys stacked in, within like
3. We'd have 3. Yeah, it is like this, but it's it's 3 high, and you all lived. I mean, my second submarine was 360 feet long, but the actual living space was probably about 150 feet. So you had basically, 150 guys, now guys and gals, living, front to end within 150 feet of space. So I typically get off the island, well, except for COVID. I would leave, travel to where, normally on to the mainland for business, a couple times a year. Mm-hmm. And I always enjoyed that. I've lived in 11 states. I've been to 46 states and 13 countries. So and for the last, 2+ years, I basically have lived at my kitchen table. So,
well, it's not a bad place to be stuck during a pandemic. Well, we'll say that.
That's true.
So listen, I kind of feel bad though, with this, we talk about movies about the Navy, and there's always some great ones, the Submariner, the great one was, The Hunt for Red October, and that now you're being supplanted by this new Maverick movie. I don't know if the pilots are actually really, if you feel like they're really part of the Navy, but you guys don't get all the glory, but the submarine guys, they do a very important work. And
well, here's what I would say. I did a submarine cruise as a midshipman, and it was on the USS Kitaro, and they were about to go on a deployment. And this was in the summer of '87, and Top Gun came out in '86. And I asked the XO, so what are you going to go do on deployment? And he would say, well, I could tell you, but I have to kill you. So,
That's so
'cause
worn
it was
out.
above, I didn't have the clearance for what they're going, or the need to know, which is really more important. So we all, my class, I'm very connected with my Naval Academy class, and we had a couple hundred pilots in my class. We had 150 submariners in my class, and we all very strongly identify with Top Gun. I saw the sequel this weekend. I thought it was excellent.
Oh, me too. It was a joyride. It was awesome.
But the thing that did trouble me, and what troubled me was that the reality that, in the 90s, we thought peace was breaking out all over, and that the world was going to transform. The Cold War was over, and so it was going to be all goodness and light. And the reality is that our future is not filled with that. There's a tremendous amount of risk, and it's not this country or that country. It's really a battle between freedom and tyranny. That is really the way that we should think about this. Is that we want every nation, the people of every nation, to have freedom, and we want every nation to come and to be a part of a free group of nation. But there are violent people, both men and women, who will do violence on behalf of us, who are willing to go into harm. And the need for having people that do that is not lessened. It is all the more present as it was when I was a young man.
Right. And the technical abilities and the smart type of folks that we need out there doing this kind of work for, as you say, to protect those freedoms that we have as members of this country and other spots out in the world, but certainly want to maintain that here. And so again, I'm always appreciative, particularly you as a veteran, and when we talk to veterans and prior service members of the forces, they just have a different understanding of kind of how the world works. When you go to a third world country for the first time, and realizing that hey, we got it pretty good where we live, and I think it's because of this, these sort of principles that we abide by, that we see this kind of thing. So it does make you grateful when you serve in the military. Plus, all the technical sort of experience that you gain and the leadership opportunities. Again, thank you for your service and for your continued service for Hawaii and the energy field. And if there's a last words that you'd like to say as you can sort of share your about you and your company. I'm excited about what we have cooking, and I think that here in the months to come, people will know more about what we have planned, and we're not quite ready to share what we've got going on. But there's more cooking. There's definitely more cooking. So, well, hey, Ted, don't keep us in the dark. Sorry, I had to do that one. Anyway, hope you have your real back. It's been a pleasure having you on, Ted. Until next time. David, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to have the conversation, and I appreciate what you do in making these conversations an important part of what you do and how you give back. Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's keep talking. Let's keep the discussion going. Thanks again, Ted. Okay. Aloha.
Make sure to subscribe to Hawaii Boss and follow us on social media at Hawaii Boss Podcast at the links in the description. We'll see you soon in the boss's office.